where you enter it through the actual world. And that world now has a name called Hypharon. I already have an idea of the world, but I solidified it as I was creating this map. And as you can see, there's quite a lot of continents on this map, a lot of places for, you know, our heroes to travel to. This could be a good long campaign, and this is just Hypharon at one point and one time. So this is Hypharon today. It looked different, obviously, thousands of years ago, and it'll look different thousands of years in the future. And that's what's so great about tabletop games and building stories in tabletop games. So we've moved on to our world map. This is the world that our players are actually going to live and thrive and have families and friends in. And then they go to camp, which is in a pocket dimension world. So the map for this world that's called Hypharon, there are technically only 4 continents that I am limiting my players to be able to actually come from. So this also means that these are the places they're going to be able to most likely visit in this particular campaign, in this particular season. And then I'm also putting restrictions on where they can even travel to in the campaign. This is mainly because all of my worlds, even when I've written books, all of my worlds, I am just obsessed with interconnectivity. It's a problem. I'm like, some of these worlds were in my head, and I even started writing a different campaign that had this world in it, or that had this continent in it. And so then I put it on this freaking world because I was like, yeah, sure, those can be interconnected some way. So that's what I did. So there are 4 places that the players can hail from, which is Clarinston, Hymph, and Pearl. I also talk about the Ring of Hypharon. I also talk about the 6 continents, well, technically 8 continents that make up the ring that is around the middle of the map. And I talk about a little bit about the Ring of Hypharon and the continents that are in that circle that are not technically in the Ring of Hypharon, because that is an actual historical event. Because the legend is that this world, this happy camper world, was created, that means that things were put into it. So who knows what lives on this world, what has lived on this world isolated from the outside world, what's happened to them in evolution. This is one of the reasons why this game is homebrew, because the happy camper world is a hellscape amalgamation of the different terrible and wonderful things about worlds, because it's man-made. Each camp will have their own map. So we did work on the camp map for this camp, but then each camp and each time period will have their own map, but only the architect will know the location of all the maps in relation to one another. However, when players are in game, they'll be able to find clues and maybe even portal locations that could potentially take them to other camps. So the world lore for Happy Camper is actually pretty simple. It's based off of like a general understanding of religious creation in terms of how a world is created. It's based off of that cultural anthropological model. So the history of Hypharon, the origins has to do with 3 goddesses, and these 3 goddesses gave something to the world that made it come alive. So, born from the breath, bone, and blood of the 3 goddesses of fate, Hypharon travels alone amongst the stars and is gifted both light and warmth by its bright orange sun as well as its 2 blue moons. Its land consists of green, brown, and orange clay, and its waters are deep, with only a few shallow seas some dare to cross. This world follows the teachings of 2 of the 3 goddesses, as it is forbidden to follow the 3rd. Hypharon gifted breath to all living things. Lilia gifted bone, the strength of solids, allowing things to grow and change. And Halil gifted blood, the transcendence of fluidity, creating the potential to traverse planes. This is the history and also the lore. These are the myths that the people of Hypharon have grown up with, what they believe, what the majority of them believe to have happened to the world. So when I was looking for imagery of these goddesses, I was also trying to think of like their personalities, who they are going to be, because they're NPCs in their own right, but they are divine. So in D&D, divinity usually do not interact with the rabble of society, and that will be the same for these three goddesses. They are worshipped, they are followed, except for one, as I've mentioned. So Hypharon is actually the goddess of the stars, and so when I thought of what she looked like, I thought literally of a beautiful goddess made of stars. And that's the running theme you'll actually see in Happy Camper in general, is that elements, the elemental, like elements, and like being a part of something, being created by something that is found naturally, is very important to the way that I explain phenomena in this world. Lilia is goddess of the moon, but you can kind of see here she also looks like she might be entranced in water. The tides and the oceans and the moon always has a deep connection, and so that makes sense to me that she could be both. And then Helia is the goddess of the sun. So first, when I talk to my players, I want to talk to them about where they are in the world today in Hypharon. So a little bit about Hypharon is that they, again, because they have a religious origin, it means that they usually have their time frames denoted by whatever happened based on their belief. And so before breath, so before Hypharon, who the entire world is named after, before she gave breath, she's essentially the main goddess, because she's the one that gave life to the people on this world. So BB would make sense for before breath, and then AB would make sense for after breath. Campaigns can range from 245 BB to 3,478 B. Lots of potential for campaigns. This is just one timeline. Now remember, this game is based kind of on Doctor Who. So this is one timeline of one like person. There could be alternate timelines, but within the same time. So it takes the sun 20 hours, so they are using hours, to rise in the east, still rise in the east, and falls in the west in one day. I wanted to make this world somewhat like comprehensible to players and not too complex. So an annual year in Hypharon is denoted not by the sun, but by the second moon. So according to this, the moons set 312 times before, when on the 312th day, the last moon is a deep blood red and emits strong radiation, and that indicates the end of the annual year. So that ring that I talked about, the ring of Hypharon, which also includes some continents that aren't actually technically in the ring of Hypharon, that is because something happened around 277 AB, where 6 of the continents joined an alliance and changed their names to indicate their power differential in the alliance. So there is the first all the way to the 6th. The unnamed island is said to just be unlivable, and it's ruled by no one. It's kind of a no man's land, except for we already have a no man's land that is ruled. So this isn't called no man's land. It's just unnamed. And then we have, of course, Omen and Eli, which are 2 continents that used to be one continent, but no longer. So the lore here is that something happened with the deep. So I say here that the deep was born, and I'm using that terminology not literally, but perhaps literally, who knows, maybe it means something, but I'm using that terminology to mean that at some point there wasn't a deep, which means there was most likely a crust on the floor of the ocean that was shallow enough, like it was close enough to the surface of the water, to where these lands were once upon a time ago very transversable. Like people were able to go across these more shallow, and when I say shallow ocean, I mean like shallow as in a couple of 100 feet, but there was no such thing as a deep ocean. So like what we consider deep is places you can't go without specialized equipment. There are things that live in that deep ocean that a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge about. That deep ocean, that type of deep ocean didn't exist until something happened, and then it just did. So before 200 BB, you're looking at a continent that was all together and where there was no such thing as a deep ocean. Nobody really, like, everything that happened in BB is just history, is conjecture, it's theory, it's what people believed happened because no one was there. But everyone knows that the deep was simply created at some point, and it broke apart this huge, massive continent that used to be in the center of the map into all of these smaller continent islands. So Omen Eli, when they broke apart originally, they were still together and they were called Ameli. And then at some point, probably, some point in history, in between the thousands of years when we get to where we are today in Hypharon, it split as well. And so now we get into the different areas, and I wanted to be really clear about their political strength, their monetary strength, and what the stereotype of the people were. Because these are places that they are not going to be able to travel to or go to very often, or really get a sense of the people and the culture. They are just going to be hearing everything just like we do these days, with a lot of bias. So I had to create that bias in each of the places that I built. So Omen Eli, they are kind of outcast because they didn't join the Ring of Hypharon. They were cast out by almost everyone, except for Ithril and Pyrrhal, who are also themselves kind of outcasts, but they are chosen outcasts. Like they are isolating themselves on purpose. And then we have Ithril and Asteris. These are two places that our players are not allowed to go. But I still want to tell them about these places because they are going to hear about them. They are in this world, so people are going to know that Ithril is called the City of Gold or the Paradise Island, and perhaps they want to figure out why. They're going to know that Asteris has, cut themselves off. They've self-isolated for the last couple of centuries, and they are ruled by a very strong religious order called the Divinity Ward, and maybe they'll want to know why. Am I going to do some level of crossover with Happy Camper and the Divinity Ward? So the Divinity Ward is another campaign that I wrote. It's a different game, and I didn't have a world that I put them in, and now they're in here. Another game is a Call of Cthulhu game I have called The Manor, and that is also in this world. I don't know why I put them all together, but I just did. And if I'm going to do a crossover, now I have the choice. That's why I did this, I guess. So like I said, our players can choose these regions to come from. These can be the places they actually were born, grew up, they have familial connection, and will most likely be the places they are going to want to travel to get supplies, to get information. This is where their connections are going to be. Their strongest of connections are going to be. So I kind of lay out the 3 things that I find very important, as well as another 4th thing, which is also fairly important. So I wanted to talk about what the land actually looks like, what its politics are, what its trade or its economic system looks like, and then what goddess they technically follow. So that is what is on each one of these. So for each of the places that they can come from, I also talk a little bit about what the kingdom looks like, just so they can get an idea of the way that the kingdoms are run for each place. So Clarinston, is a bit of a family feud place. Dragon's Breath has a really nice, really big military power. Himph, they believe they're like kind of like the chosen one, you know, because they believe they were the first to ever get like living people. Then we have Pyrrol, that is a relatively small kingdom, and we kind of learn that they are relatively neutral. So that's essentially the world and the lore, and that's what I've been creating throughout this entire Preptober. So how do you play Happy Camper? Well, let's go into that. Okay, I think that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you are interested in learning what Happy Camper actually is, how you can play the game, and when my next season is going to start, I am going to post my next video next Friday talking all about Happy Camper. So thank you all for watching, and see you next time.